Mariana and I are here in Rock Creek Park, and inside this box is a barred owl, adult, which arrived at City Wildlife about a week ago. It had some sort of head trauma, hit a building or a car, and was treated this week, was flight tested just this morning. This animal is ready to go, and we're here, and we're gonna see it released.
Shall we?
Yeah.
I'm going to stand up. Oh, wow. You are so lovely. Yeah. Okay, John, come this way. I'm going to take him up this way. Okay? You want to get out, fella? You really do. Really. Come on, baby.
Another successful City Wildlife customer.
That was great.
Incredible.
But John, you have a show to host.
I do, so I need to put my mask on and get over to City Wildlife right now. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to City Wildlife's 2020 virtual celebration. Welcome to the wild side. My name is John Kelly. I'm a columnist at the Washington Post, and I'm a big fan of City Wildlife and what it does. I hear a lot from people about how there's no such thing as a native Washingtonian, that everyone comes to Washington from somewhere else. I know that's not the case with humans. I was born in Washington, and it's definitely not the case with animals. There is a huge native population of little animals, medium-sized animals, big animals, squirrels, chipmunks, snakes, turtles, lizards, and birds, some of which are native and some of which come through a couple times a year. And if they get into trouble when they're in Washington, they could turn to City Wildlife. And we're here today to celebrate the work that City Wildlife does, to ask you to support the organization, and to show you some stories of some of the animals, native and otherwise, who were helped by this wonderful group. So please sit down, enjoy what we have in store for you, and please meet the board and staff of City Wildlife.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Ann Lewis, and I'm president of City Wildlife. And I would like to introduce our co-founder and executive director, Jim Monsma.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. And it's now my honor to introduce our wonderful veterinarian, a real asset to wild animals in the District of Columbia, Dr. Cheryl Chulgin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. We're so glad you could be here with us tonight. And now,
Almost live
from City Wildlife,
welcome to
the wild side.
Thank you, and let's take a look behind the scenes with Call of the Wild here at City Wildlife.
Welcome to City Wildlife. We are Washington, D.C.'s first and only wildlife rehabilitation center. We got started because Ann Lewis and I, who were both associated with the Washington Humane Society, were discussing the services available for animals in the District of Columbia, and realizing that they're generally pretty good, but there was one big hole in the range of services, and that was for wildlife. There was just nothing going on here. So we decided, well, we could do something about that and decided to start a wildlife rehabilitation center. And we opened our doors in 2013 and are been busy ever since. We take in about 1,800 animals a year, taking of all sorts of wildlife. DC is amazingly rich in wildlife, and we've got all kinds of critters come through here. We get the urban animals that you would expect, like squirrels and pigeons and whatnot. But everything including owls and opossums, and we had a muskrat the other day, or the other month, lots of different things. I like to point out the permits that are on the wall here. This is what you need to do this kind of work. The average citizen doesn't have these permits. They can't treat wildlife at home. It's not legal, nor will they be successful unless they know what they're doing. It's very particular. You need to have essentially a wildlife veterinarian, which we are lucky to have in Dr. Chuljan. She is a wildlife veterinarian, doesn't do dogs, doesn't do cats. Well, she can, but her real specialty is birds, turtles, snakes, the wildlife that we bring her. She's at work right now, and we can go take a look and see what she's up to at the moment.
Whoever's working on our front desk will take them in from either DC Animal Care and Control or the public, whoever brings them in. Get them back here, set them up in our computer system so we can get medical records started. I'll get weight, do an exam, see if I can find anything obviously wrong with them, and then do any diagnostics such as x-rays, blood work, fecal sample, and the like. It's always a surprise. That's one of the things I do like about this job is you learn to expect the unexpected. Sometimes we'll get in pigeons, squirrels, what you usually see walking around every day, a few songbirds here and there. Other times we'll get in a red-tailed hawk, get in bald eagles. We had a groundhog, a chipmunk. Yeah, we get a lot of variety, which is really nice. So the red-tailed hawk actually came in this morning. She was extremely skinny, emaciated, dehydrated, and pale as well. She had difficulty standing, but was able to stand, but cannot fly at this point. Did some x-rays on her, did not find any injuries, and then did some blood work, found that her blood lead level was low, which is good. Unfortunately, we do have a problem with that in birds in an urban area, especially like DC. Did a fecal sample on her, found a lot of intestinal parasites, so we will be treating for those. And then on the blood as well, I did a blood smear, found that she's very anemic, low red blood cell count, and her blood cells do look normal, however, and she is producing new ones, which is excellent. So somewhere she's losing blood. She did have a lot of parasites on her, ectoparasites, and they are blood-sucking parasites, so we'll be treating for those as well. And hopefully this is all underlying the fact that she's young, having difficulty hunting, and then has a lot of parasites compounding everything. So we are the first and only wildlife rehabilitation center in the district. We work very closely with DC Animal Care and Control, and we both support each other in the work in helping the district's wildlife. Without us and DC Animal Care and Control, unfortunately, the wildlife here does not have anybody to take care of them when they're injured or sick.
So that's what we call our treatment room, and that's what the doctor does with these animals. But they don't stay in the treatment room. Where they spend more time is in what we call the kitchen, but it's much more than the kitchen, as I'll show you right now. We call this the kitchen, but it's much more than that. This is where most of the orphaned animals grow up, at least until they're capable of eating on their own and whatnot. So while they're here, we have a variety of cages that they can live in, including incubators to keep them warm. That's very important. All sorts of different foodstuffs that we feed them. Formulas when they're real young, but when they get a little older, we have to, for instance, crack the nuts for the squirrels and make different dishes full of vegetables and whatnot, mealworms and earthworms in some cases for our animals. So our animals eat pretty much what you and I eat, with a few exceptions like the mice and the earthworms, but lots of vegetables. We do most of our shopping for our animals right at the grocery store. We go through sweet potatoes and squash and berries of all sorts. So it's pretty quiet now, but if you were to come here in June, it would be a whole nother thing. In the summer, this room would be packed. A couple hundred birds, seriously, a couple hundred, and baby squirrels, baby rabbits, all kinds of stuff, opossums and whatnot. And the volunteers and the staff spend much of their time in here feeding everybody. The animals eat, the birds every half hour. So as soon as you're done feeding the birds, the guys that you started with are hungry again. You got to start all over again. Squirrels eat every couple hours when they're real young. So there's a lot of feeding going on, and our volunteers take care of that. But this is a very busy place, and the activity goes essentially sunrise till sunset. So this is where the orphans grow up, but not so much the ducks. We have a special room for them, and I'd like to show you that next. The way, however, I should point out our hard-working washer and dryer. These machines, if anybody is here, these machines are on there. We're doing laundry. We use laundry for the bottom of the cages because we can wash it and dry it, and we do that all day long. And the volunteers spend many, many hours folding it and putting it away so we can use it again. Which reminds me, if you have old towels or old sheets or pillowcases, don't throw them out. We can use them. Bring them to us. We put them to good use. But on to the ducks. So, as I said, this is where the orphan ducks stay, and where they begin their stay at City Wildlife. And we get a lot of them, hundreds of ducklings every year that have lost their parents. They start out in basins like this, which are specially made for ducklings. They have a section for water, or a dry section, so the ducks can get out. And this is the start. When they get a little older, we turn that part of the room into a little corral. We call it the duck corral for the sort of adolescent ducks. And April, our Duck Watch coordinator, can show you that and explain to you how that works.
In 2020, Duck Watch volunteers assisted with the rescue or safe escort of over 60 broods of ducklings. Duck Watch volunteers protect and assist nesting ducks and their ducklings throughout DC. We design solutions such as ramps that facilitate ducks' natural behavior. We conduct citizen science. And we build an educated, connected community of duck-friendly humans. We also worked with the management of the district wharf to design and install ramps and floats, which will greatly improve the survival chances of ducklings in the Southwest area. Sometimes people ask, why ducks? Well, because urban ducks often need our help, but also because they're charismatic animals that people enjoy and connect with. In turn, interacting with the ducks connects humans to each other and raises our awareness of and respect for all the wildlife in our midst.
The last stop on the tour is what we call Turtle Town. And it's where we keep our cold-blooded guests, the snakes and the turtles, but we get a lot of turtles mostly. They're in here. And they don't like to show themselves much. And they're all hiding, which is what turtles do. But turtles we get for two problems: hit by car or hit by lawnmower. Those are the two big ones. But turtles, I think, is very important work, because this is one of the species where we're quite sure we are making a difference in terms of the long-term survival of the species. They live so long, and they have to get 8 years old, box turtles, until they can breed. So that, and their territory is very well defined, and they have to be on that territory. You can't move them around. So that for every turtle we save, we're saving a territory and the future of the turtles on that territory. So this does make a difference. So thank you for coming and joining me for this tour this evening, and thank you for your interest in our work, and most of all, thank you for your support. We've changed the environment so much. We've made it convenient and pleasant for us with the plate glass windows and the roads and the lawnmowers and the chainsaws. But for the animals, that means that every day is an obstacle course with fatal consequences on the left and the right. And unless we do something to help them, something like supporting wildlife rehabilitation, they may not be here tomorrow. So for every dollar that you send us, I promise it'll be well spent and put to good use, saving these animals so that we can get them back out there, hopefully not just for another day, but for another century.
It is time for our first quiz question this evening, and the first question is, what is the state bird of the District of Columbia? Is it a blue jay, the wood thrush, the cardinal, or the rock pigeon? The state bird of DC, blue jay, wood thrush, cardinal, or rock pigeon. And as you contemplate that, we have another bird to think about. We have here a little swimming pool full of rubber duckies, and there are 50 of them, one for each of the first 50 people who signed up for tonight's festivities. I am gonna grab one, and it has a number on the bottom, and if that matches your number, you get a prize.
Thanks, John. I'm Paula Goldberg. I'm a member of the City Wildlife Board of Directors, and I have the pleasure of announcing our first door prize winner. That is number 22. Let's see who that is. Number 22 is Alex Neal. Congratulations, Alex. You have won a beautiful, sweet, cuddly stuffed opossum toy. And what could be more sweeter than to go with this than a box of City Wildlife chocolates and a City Wildlife logo journal. Thanks so much, John. Back to you.
Thanks, Paula. And the answer to that question, wood thrush. Wood thrush is the state bird of the District of Columbia. It's time now to meet the neighbors, or meet the writer behind Meet the Neighbors. Brandon Keim is a nature and science journalist and author of The Eye of the Sandpiper. He will discuss his upcoming book, Meet the Neighbors, about animal intelligence and human relationships to nature. Meet the Neighbors was partially inspired by the wildlife-rich suburbs of Washington, D.C. Let's meet Brandon.
Hey everybody, my name's Brandon Keim. I'm a science and nature journalist, and I write a lot about animal intelligence, which is what I'm here to talk about today. And I want to start things off actually with this video right here of a crow dropping blocks into a tube of water in order to raise its level so we can get a treat. And so this is emblematic of a lot of the research that has taken place into animal intelligence, which is really focused in its early years on empirical things, kind of problem solving and reasoning and memory. There's different ways of thinking about what you just saw. Now, did the crow understand the physics involved and reason out the solution, or did he just, learn through trial and error and association that dropping stones in water leads to good things? And the weight of the evidence actually points to the former. Crows are really insightful creatures, but even if it was just trial and error, that's pretty special too. And, really a lot of what we do is trial and error and association. We're not reasoning all the time. We just do stuff and we get it to work. And I think, so that's one lesson of animal intelligence studies is it's just, it's not just that animals are doing things like we do, but that we do things like they do. Until a couple of decades ago, tool use was considered one of the capacities that makes us human. And it's really worth reflecting on that phrase that, when people talk about what makes us human, it's usually implied as what sets us apart. And so that notion was completely dispelled. One of the landmark studies was Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees using sticks to fish termites. And since then, scientists have found tool use all over the place. I mean, even ants, there's ants who use sponges as tools. But one of my favorite examples is octopi using shells as hiding places because they're just so adorable. And what then about bird nests? Bird nests have tool-like properties, obviously, but then building them is instinctive. So the conventional wisdom has been that nest building doesn't count as an example of tool use. But nest building is also something that birds do better with time and with practice after watching other birds make their nests. And studies show that birds understand the physical properties of the materials they use. So it's at once an instinctive process, but there's also conscious thought involved. And these things aren't exclusive, right? Instinct and reason, can go hand in hand. And that's how we experience our own lives. If you play a sport or a musical instrument, you know what it's like to play it instinctively, but also be thinking consciously about the composition or the game. And I think nests to me are just really emblematic of that. And another great example of instinct combining with thoughtfulness comes from black-capped chickadees. So every fall, they're hiding thousands and thousands of seeds to eat in the winter. And, this is again something that used to be thought of as just totally instinctive. They're just kind of going through this seed caching program without really being aware of what's happening. But research suggests they are actually, thinking about the future. Just the fact that chickadees are all over the place and you see them and they're such an everyday reminder of this is something I really enjoy. This idea of thinking about the future takes us to the idea of self, and thinking about the future implies self-awareness. If you're caching seeds, you're caching them for yourself. And, our own sense of self-awareness and knowing that you are you is one of those properties that's just so fundamental to human experience that it's really, I think, impossible to conceive of not having a sense of self. And yet, in other animals, self-awareness, has been really controversial. This screen grab here is from a famous study on bottlenose dolphins recognizing themselves in a mirror, which, until recently was kind of the gold standard of testing, and it's something that only a few species, various great apes, magpies, manta rays, possibly wild boar and cleaner wrasse fish, they're the only ones who are known to pass this test. And a great many scientists thought that self-awareness was just incredibly rare in the animal world. But, I think that, that really is not the case. It's just the case that mirrors are not always the greatest way of getting at a sense of self. And dogs, for the most part, really don't recognize themselves in mirrors. But if you give them a test of whether they recognize their own odor, then, they pass that very readily. So it's just the mirror test isn't very useful. And if you're a dog, your sense of self is much more wrapped up in scent than your own image, which of course any dog companion knows. And there's some scientists actually now who argue that, a sense of self really isn't rare. It's this, very bedrock cognitive capacity that is possessed really by all vertebrates and a great many invertebrates as well. It's just, it's evolution's way of integrating different senses with the body's motion across space. So this green frog here is self-aware, and not in a manner identical to our own. Self is shaped by all sorts of other mental abilities as well. But there's somebody in there. For a long time, cognition and emotion were really considered separate things, and emotion was very much neglected. But of course, feelings are properties of our minds too, obviously. And, the raw neurobiological components, the hormones and neurotransmitters and what have you, are all broadly conserved throughout evolution. And, emotions are just evolution's way of shaping behavior in beneficial ways. So this frog, getting his body temperature where it needs to be, probably feels good while doing it. Another great line of research comes from birds enjoying the act of singing. I heard an interview with an ornithologist once who was really bothered by the idea that people think birds enjoy singing, and he was saying, no, this isn't fun. It's all about territory and finding mates and dominance, and it's this life or death utilitarian struggle playing out every morning, not just a happy concert. But actually, it is a happy concert too. So the act of feeling, or the experience of feeling good or feeling bad, is a momentary thing. And then if you prolong it, you get happiness and sadness. And these two, of course, are found in many other animals. And there's been some really clever research on happiness and sadness in bumblebees. And so, and bees of all sorts, not just bumblebees. And so if you walk by a patch of flowers, you hear that buzzing as you get close, and that's a sound of happiness. So on the flip side, there's the whole spectrum of negative states. And so some scientists and philosophers historically have argued that feeling pain is a function of intelligence. And so the quote-unquote stupid animals don't feel pain as acutely as we do. And there's really no evidence at all to support that idea. something else on which the scientific thinking has changed a great deal just in my lifetime is fish pain. And I was raised to think that fish didn't feel pain, which now is at best a very controversial position. And I think, really there's overwhelming evidence against it, which makes common sense. It's hard to think how creatures could have evolved for hundreds of millions of years without something as fundamentally useful. And in this photograph here, this is an orca carrying her dead baby. And that behavior has actually been observed in a great many cetacean and primate species. Being sensitive to another animal's emotional state is what we call empathy. And some of the most interesting work on animal empathy involves rats and the extent to which they will go to help distressed individuals. And I think what's really interesting about this research is it illustrates how sort of empathy occurs at different scales, right? So humans, we're really amazing at we can listen to stories about somebody else or read about them on a piece of paper and feel for them. And so that's a very abstracted, cognitively sophisticated form of empathy. And rats, as best as we know, can't do that. But they can see someone who's upset and respond to it. And that's really the core of empathy and at the core of our own everyday interactions. And it's something that's likely rooted very deeply in evolution. It's an adaptation for species who are highly social and have parental care. One such species is gray-lag geese, and there's been some really interesting research on how goose couples console one another when they're stressed. Empathy is obviously a very good quality in a relationship. Animal relationships in general, are traditionally described in very sterile terms, affiliative behaviors and pair bonding and fitness benefits. Scientists and serious-minded people up until recently don't really talk about animals loving and caring for one another, which I think is really unfortunate. I love this quote. "The assumption that animals choose mates predictably and rationally is an important assumption in both ultimate and proximate analyses of mate choice. It is becoming clear, however, that irrational decisions and unpredictable linearities often characterize mate choice." So, in other words, animals follow their hearts. We're not all just drawn to maximum fitness benefits. And then as we're talking about love and affection, that leads to relationships. And animal life, is social life. New tracking technologies really allow us to see in a very fine-grained level of detail how species considered asocial or indiscriminately social they actually have quite a bit of complexity in that. And certain individuals prefer to spend time with certain other individuals. And we can talk about rattlesnakes and sharks and sparrows as having friends. There was a lovely study of song sparrows in Seattle in an urban setting, and it found out that within any summertime flock, there are juvenile males who will spend the entire summer basically within a few feet of one another. And then as adults, they'll go on to find mates and build adjacent nests, and they'll share a common territory and learn common songs. And it's just, it's such a rich social experience playing out right under our noses. And being social is being communicative. And there's been some really fascinating research on Japanese tits. They're a relative of chickadees who actually have syntax, which means the meaning of their calls changes depending on the order in which they're given. And syntax is something that was, long considered unique to human language. And another supposedly unique property was referentiality, so communication that isn't just instinctive and emotional, but refers to external objects. And I think very appropriately, it was domestic chickens were the first birds in whom referentiality was demonstrated. Then once you've got relationships and communication, you really have the foundation of community, and living in community means making group decisions. And, this is another process that happens in so many ways. In this photograph, we have African buffalo. For their herds, when a group is considering where to go, the females indicate their preference by standing up and gazing in a desired direction, and then the group will settle on an average of those trajectories, which it's a form of democracy in a way. And there's so many species in whom decisions are made democratically all of this was very broad brush, and there's all sorts of fun things we didn't think about or talk about, like animal culture and morality and systems of exchange. But we hit on the important stuff, and not every capacity is present in any animal, and a pigeon's love isn't necessarily the same as our own, but there's a lot of overlap. And, this isn't just about dolphins and elephants and a few extra smart animals, but, really all of them. And we're surrounded by animal intelligence. And, you walk outside the door and you're in a landscape that is just teeming with minds, with fellow persons, only some of whom are human. And so the question then is what do we do with all of these insights? And, as I just said a moment ago, I think of them as persons, and I think that's very important. We need to think of other animals as fellow persons. And then, the question is, what do we do with that? And I am writing a book about that subject right now. And this raccoon here is the book's spirit animal. And the photograph actually comes from the stormwater retention pond at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. And so this pond, could have been just another crappy pond surrounded by turf grass, but instead it was turned into a tiny little sanctuary. And, that sort of thing is so important. Habitat matters, including very much the habitat in our backyards. This is a home for fellow non-human persons. And another implication of thinking about animals this way is also really thinking deeply about the duties of care we have to our animals, our animal neighbors, and especially our animal neighbors whom we impact. And that's where city wildlife comes in. And, what they're doing and what you're supporting is just hugely important and wonderful. And it's putting empathy and compassion into practice, which is why I'm such a big fan and why I'm really happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
All right, it is time for our second quiz question, and we are moving out of the avian world to another world. The question is, which of the following are marsupials found in North America? The raccoon, the wombat, the crested-tailed deer mouse, or the opossum? Which is a marsupial found in North America? Raccoon, wombat, crested-tailed deer mouse, or opossum? As you think about that, it's time for more duck plucking.
Thanks, John. Our second door prize goes to number 38. Number 38 is Margaretha Backers. Congratulations, Margaretha. You have won a copy of Brandon Keim's book, The Eye of the Sandpiper. And since we heard so much about animal intelligence in Brandon's talk, we thought that whoever wins this prize should have their intelligence challenge. So included in the second door prize is a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We've also included City Wildlife chocolates and the City Wildlife logo journal in this prize. Thanks, John.
Thank you again, Paula. And the answer to our second quiz question, which marsupial is found in North America, is opossum. If you said opossum, you were correct. If you said anything else, you were wrong. I'd like now to segue right into something we call Wild Tales, stories of city wildlife. The next part of our evening is a look at some of the ways city wildlife has helped animals in Washington this past year. It's a part of the program we're calling Wild Tales. And I want to start with Dr. Cheryl Chulgen. We pride ourselves in Washington in being patriotic. We love the bald eagle, the symbol of our country, and we also have a tough time finding parking in this town. Tell me about this animal and how it came to city wildlife.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So this is definitely one of our more exciting and unusual cases that we've had this year. This eagle was found stuck in a parking garage downtown. Thankfully, the animal care control officers who responded to the call were able to get the eagle to us. And amazingly, very little injury to this eagle. Had a few abrasions on its head, but otherwise in great shape. And was able to be released shortly thereafter. One of my favorite parts about this case is that when we did go to release this eagle with Dan Roush from DOEE, we let the eagle out, immediately flew off, and then out of the corner of our eyes, we see swooping in another eagle, and we assumed it was an eagle coming to defend its territory. But the two met up and perched in a branch and were vocalizing to each other. And we think that it was actually the other mated eagle from this pair. Never seen anything like that before, so it was very memorable and really nice to see.
Any idea how a bald eagle finds its way into what looks like an underground parking garage?
Well, like you said, it's hard to find parking in DC. You can't be picky. Now, we think that
the animal was in good shape, though.
Yeah. So we think the eagle had gone into the garage hunting, maybe chasing a pigeon or something, and then just couldn't figure out how to get back out again.
That's a real intersection of wild and urban. Is that common for the animals that you encounter?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. We have a varied amount of wildlife in the district, a lot more varied than people realize that we have come in here. Typically, animals that you would consider being out, more in the country, we actually do have here in DC. We have rabbits, we have deer here in DC, coyotes, we've got a lot, turtles.
Wow. Well, thank you. An animal that I really do not associate with Washington at all and with an urban environment is the horseshoe crab. Sue Chase, any idea? Well, first of all, tell us what happened.
Well, DC Animal Care and Control got a call and they showed up, and what they found is 3 horseshoe crabs in somebody's front yard right next to the sidewalk. We're not sure where they came from. And although it's not a native species, and but it is in DC, it is native to the area, and it is considered a vulnerable species. So but it really did pose a challenge for us. It's not something we'd ever dealt with, nor that we ever prepared to deal with. But someone came up with the idea of calling the zoo. We have a really great relationship with some of the keepers at the zoo. And as it happens, the zoo actually has somebody who's responsible for the horseshoe crabs that are in the exhibits at the zoo. So we talked with that person, and they gave us instructions for how to set up a temporary housing. But we knew actually that these guys their best survival was going to be right back out, because we had no way of being able to treat them effectively. So I had a friend who worked with horseshoe crabs in the wild, and we called and to find out if we could just release anywhere. And as it happened, we could. So we decided that we could release right in the Chesapeake. So the horseshoe crabs, unfortunately, one didn't make it overnight. But 2 of them, because 3 came in the door, 2 of them went with me to a beach on Kent Island where they were released and happily went off into the surf.
And are these the first horseshoe crabs that City Wildlife has ever dealt with?
Oh yeah, it's not something that would normally come in. We don't deal with that kind of species to begin with. And it's not a species that actually you would ever find in DC because it needs to be in salt water.
These were absolutely the first horseshoe crabs I had ever examined and treated. When they said, "Hey, come work at City Wildlife," I was expecting, pigeons, squirrels. Nobody told me about the horseshoe crabs.
They are fascinating creatures. I confess I've always been a bit creeped out by them. So you had to touch them. What's it like to touch a horseshoe crab? What's it like to touch 3 horseshoe crabs?
They're really harmless little animals. They really can't hurt you at all.
Well, and the interesting thing about them is they're not really a crab.
Yeah.
They're part of the arachnid family. So if you look on the bottom, they've got way more legs than you think they should have. And so it is kind of weird to look underneath and see all these legs.
Wow. Well, we've had a bird, we've had an arachnid that is looks like people think is a crab. Moving, well, I was going to say mammals, but I guess they're actually marsupials. I know that people who love possums say they are the coolest animals around. Jim Monsma, can you tell us about this litter of the little critters that came to City Wildlife?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and you're absolutely right. I've never met a rehabilitator that didn't love opossums. They're really nice to work with, and they're cute when they're younger. And even when they try and be mean, there's some cuteness about how they're trying to be mean. It's so unconvincing. But yeah, we get litters of them throughout the year, mostly in the spring and summer. Two of them, one that I think we have some pictures of, but another one, the first one that came in, one of the first litters came in this year. Some guy in Southeast Washington was mowing his lawn and wasn't paying much attention. But when he went to empty the lawnmower bag, he found 8 baby opossums in the lawnmower bag. He must have just hoovered them off the lawn. And I don't know if they were all unhurt, but anyway, he brought us 8 and they were unhurt. Doctor got busy, raised them, let them go. But the ones I think that we're thinking of right now came in on 1st of August, beginning of August. And they were brought in. There's a special kind of person in this world that must get some kind of special medal for compassion, kind of person that if they see a dead possum in the road, they pull over and check the pouch to make sure there's no babies in there. This happens. And one of these people saw a dead opossum in the alley, took the time to go over and take a look, and found 6 babies clinging to the mother. The mother was deceased. And as the doctor is fond of saying, those possums were facing certain doom, because the possums don't know it. I mean, they're not real Mensa creatures. They don't know anything better than to hold on to mom, but mom wasn't going anywhere. Her going days were over. But anyway, they got the babies off of mom, brought them in here. They were not in the best of shape, but not in the worst. And again, the doctor got busy and managed to save all 6 of them, the 6 that we got. And they were here for quite a while and became quite favorites among the staff. They were really kind of cute. And but before they got too used to us and before we got too used to them, they got a ride off to the country. And by about mid to late September, they were on their own. The nice thing about possums is you put them somewhere where it's good to be a possum, they're fine. They're not territorial. They wander their entire life. I call them the Jack Kerouacs of the animal kingdom. They're just off and going.
Well, on the road with baby possum, Jim, thank you. And that's a good tip. See a dead possum, check for live possums. We are moving through the animal kingdom here, and snakes. Dr. C, tell me about this snake.
Oh, it's the cutest little snake. I love this snake. This is a little DeKay's brown snake who we got a call from the rescuer who had found the snake stuck to a glue trap. So we advised them, as we always do, cover them, put them in a box, bring the whole thing here, trap, snake and all. Don't try to take them off yourselves. And so the snake got here very quickly, just like we'd recommended. Was able to very, very gently work the snake off the glue trap. This is a tiny little snake. They're about the size of a pencil, itty bitty. So it's a very delicate procedure. And amazingly, was able to get the snake off without any injuries, which is incredibly impressive. A lot of our sticky trap victims, unfortunately, they'll injure themselves trying to get off. Some can even kill themselves trying to get off. And a lot of it's because of very stressful for them to be stuck to a trap like that.
That looked like a very tiny snake, as you said, the size of a pencil, and that's how big they grow. That's a full size,
pretty much adult size. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And after that, he did really well. We just kept him overnight to give him a little time to rest and relax, and were able to release him the next day.
Have you ever found a mongoose in Washington?
No mongoose. No mongooses. Mongooses.
Well, speaking of geese, although not really, I get a lot of emails from readers in the spring who have found a nest or seen a duck nest in a planter outside their office or the pool or someplace. And they always want to know what they should do. And I've got a great place to send them to, and that is to City Wildlife and Duck Watch. Is April here? Is she going to talk about Duck Watch and its work?
Yes, I'm here. So I'm April Linton. I am City Wildlife Life's Duck Watch Coordinator. And I wanted to talk today about ducks in swimming pools. So every year, a few of our mallard moms choose to nest in a lushly landscaped backyard with a swimming pool. And when a homeowner alerts us of a pool nest, we make plans to capture and relocate the family once the ducklings hatch. One of our rescues this year, volunteers actually used strung together pool noodles. So they sewed them together to make a boom and then used that to herd the mom and her ducklings up a ramp and out of the water. And so then after that, we could contain the ducklings using pieces of cardboard, pick them up and put them in a crate. Then one volunteer gradually moved the crate of peeping ducklings into a garden shed to lure the mom inside, and another hid behind the shed door, and a third volunteer monitored the mom's progress and signaled when she was fully inside and it was safe to close the door behind her. Then inside the shed, we hand-caught the mom and put her into a separate crate and took the whole family to Fletcher's Cove, which is an abundant and really beautiful waterfowl habitat.
The pool noodles being strung together, that's, talk about the necessity being the mother of invention. That's a great idea. Had you ever seen anything like that before?
As far as I know, that was invented by City Wildlife president and longtime Duck Watch volunteer Ann Lewis.
And how when you are made aware of a nest, what happens? Some of them you monitor, some of them need rescuing. What is the typical outcome for the duck families?
They do very well, but you're absolutely right. Sometimes all we need to do is pay attention. We always try to find out when the duck started nesting. And if we can find out when she showed up and how many eggs she has, we can get a pretty good idea of when we should be extra careful to monitor because the ducklings are going to hatch. And then once they hatch, they're going to hang out in the nest for about a day, and then mom will want to walk them to water. So if it's downtown, we want to have volunteers standing by so that we can help her get up curves, cross the street, etc.
Well, thank you. We're going to stick with birds and something that's very important, especially in Washington, so built up around here in the city and all around it. Lights Out DC. Elizabeth, can you tell us about what Lights Out DC is and why it's so important?
Yes, of course. Thank you. As the coordinator of Lights Out DC, I also want to announce something really important, which is that we've been doing this program now for 10 years. And we've put together a report documenting Lights Out findings and recommendation, a report that's available on City Wildlife's website. And of course, we could not have done this program without a dedicated group of volunteers and the support of DC residents. So to answer your question, since 2010, Lights Out volunteers have been monitoring for bird glass collisions in specified areas of downtown DC during spring and fall migration. So that's generally March and April, and then again in September, October, November. And thanks to these committed volunteers, Lights Out has operated continuously over 10 years. We've documented bird glass collisions, volunteers rescue injured birds, they identify problematic buildings, and then we work with the owners and managers of those buildings to reduce hazards to birds. So from 2010 to 2019, we've documented over 3,000 window strikes, and that includes 105 species of birds. And related to Sue's point about the crabs, 24 of the species that we found are in the District of Columbia species of greatest conservation need. So these are birds that are already in trouble for other reasons. So we wanted tonight to share a video with you to give you some sense of what Lights Out volunteers typically do. And this is part of a video that Abby Milberg filmed when she accompanied Ann Lewis on November 4th, 2019.
We found 33 birds yesterday. The week before, I found 13, which is also really, really high.
Okay, we've got a live one. It's a hermit thrush.
We know exactly where to look at each building. Typically, they're hitting in the same place. You can see the problem here. You've got this sheer glass wall and trees lit inside, and they just think they can go in. What happened the first year is we found a whole bunch of birds, and we contacted them immediately. We said, well, can you dim the lights, at least during migratory seasons? Once they dimmed the lights, there was a 2/3 reduction in number of birds hitting the buildings. The most cooperative building is the convention center. In 2016, they installed bird-safe film on the outside of the glass that has almost imperceptible little vertical lines in it, and they reduced it 100%. It's wonderful. Release is the best.
There you have the happy ending. That ended well for that white-throated sparrow, but unfortunately, this is a huge problem. We've had some success getting buildings to dim their lights and mitigate some windows, but there remains much work to do. There's window collisions account for approximately 300 million to 1 billion fatal collisions annually.
Wow, that's sobering news. Elizabeth, thank you. I would never say that we've saved the best for last, but the next two animals, which though they may look different, fall under the same umbrella as far as animals go. That is squirrels. Chipmunks are squirrels. And chipmunk is something that Sue dealt with this year.
Yeah, we had a chipmunk arrive at City Wildlife via DC Animal Care and Control. And definitely appeared to have an injured left leg from a possible animal attack, probably a cat, which is one of the reasons we promote people to keep their cats indoors, not only for the chipmunk kind of animals, but also for birds. So we did radiographs on the chipmunk, and it showed that it had a fracture of the tibia in the left leg. Fortunately, the fracture was pretty minimal. There was very little displacement of the bones, which means it was a good candidate for rehab. So the leg was splinted, and medications were given for pain. And then 12 days later, we released a very healed chipmunk.
Well, that's great. I mean, there's nothing cuter than a chipmunk, and they are so purposeful, and they move through the world so quickly and so directly. I always love seeing them. Now, the big brother of the chipmunk is the squirrel, and we have a couple different species around here. Everybody's seen the gray squirrel, very common. Lafayette Square was once measured to have the highest per acre concentration of squirrels that had ever been measured. And Jim, you're going to talk about a squirrel, and I have no idea what you're going to say about this squirrel.
Yeah, two squirrels.
Wait to hear it.
Yeah, two squirrels actually. Well, this was a story unlike any other. And we did our best to put the story together. Not quite sure that we have it right, but there's a lot of confusing elements. But this is how it goes, as close as we can figure. There was a guy from Nebraska who was a rehabilitator, and he made a trip to Norfolk, Virginia, and he brought his two squirrels that he was rehabilitating with him because they needed care, daily care, hourly care. So he brought them with him, but he was not only rehabilitating squirrels, he was, in addition, selling drugs, for which he got arrested. Now, the woman in the room next to the drug-dealing squirrel rehabilitator knew that he had squirrels and realized that when he got hauled off to jail, no one was there to take care of the squirrels. So she intervened, grabbed the squirrels, and drove them back to DC, at which point she realized she wasn't sure what to do with squirrels like this and brought them to city wildlife. Caught our attention because one was a fox squirrel, and we really don't have fox squirrels in the district. And so we wanted to know where this came from, and she told us the story, which I've just shared. So we got them. They were in decent shape, actually, for having been rehabilitated by a drug dealer, which doesn't happen to many squirrels, I don't imagine. But anyway, they were in pretty good shape, and we just essentially finished raising them, and they were ready to go, but you couldn't release them here. So we, through various channels, found an airline that was willing to fly squirrels across the country for a fee, and found a non-stop flight, which we needed for squirrels, to Omaha, Nebraska. And we figured that was close enough. I know Nebraska is a big place, but if we can get them to Omaha, it's got to be close enough. Found a rehabilitator in Omaha who was willing to meet the plane and collect the squirrels, which she did. And a few months later, we got a card in the mail saying squirrels have been rehabilitated. They are released. They're back in their native habitat in Nebraska, and left us saying, boy, you really don't know what you're getting into when you come to work at City Wildlife. Every day is something else. But this was quite the unusual story. The other squirrel, I said there were two, and there were. One was a fox squirrel. The other was a regular eastern gray squirrel, but he wasn't an eastern gray squirrel. He was a Midwest eastern gray squirrel. So they were best of friends, and they got released together, and I guess they're probably still hanging out there in Nebraska. But
and it sounds like they were both flying squirrels too.
Yeah, no, they flying squirrels a brief part of their career.
Oh, wow. Well, just another day around the office at City Wildlife.
Yeah,
and that really shows the broad spectrum of animals that you might encounter on any given day, the staff and the volunteers there. So all of you, thank you so much for sharing those wild tales of City Wildlife.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another quiz question for you. What protects the brain of woodpeckers as they drill holes into trees and into the side of your house? Is it the woodpecker's tongue, its cerebrospinal fluid, its skull, or its crest? What protects the brain of woodpeckers? Tongue, cerebrospinal fluid, skull, or crest? And as you put your brain to that question, I will select another rubber duck.
Great. Our next door prize goes to number 44. Let's see who that is, that lucky person is. It's Marianne Harding. Congratulations, Marianne. You have won a Squirrel and Friends serving tray, adorable, and squirrels do have lots of friends, especially here at City Wildlife and around the city, with some matching napkins by artist Vicki Sawyer. This prize also includes City Wildlife chocolates and the City Wildlife Journal.
Paula, thank you again. You're doing yeoman's work. Now, quiz number 3, the answer. What protects the brains of woodpeckers as they pound their heads against wood? It is the tongue. The tongue is what protects woodpeckers. We have now a toast to local wildlife heroes, people who help City Wildlife do their work and support the work and the animals in this city. Please meet some local wildlife heroes.
It is my great pleasure to honor Mary M. Che, Council Member for Ward 3 on the District of Columbia Council. Mary has held this position since 2007, and she's currently chair of the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. For many years, Councilmember Che has been a strong advocate for animals in the District of Columbia, and she's championed several bills that are important to wildlife, including the Wildlife Protection Act, which actually enables city wildlife to do wildlife rehabilitation in the district. She's also sponsored and seen pass the recent Ivory Act, which outlaws the sale of elephant ivory and rhino tusks in the District of Columbia. And she supported a lot of other sustainable legislation, including reduced pesticide use, clean waterways, controlling light pollution, and other sustainable practices in the District of Columbia. So Mary has been unfailingly in sync with the mission of City Wildlife from the beginning, and even brings the mission home with her, reporting animals in need that she sees in the community, either to us if it's wildlife or to the Humane Rescue Alliance if it's a domestic animal. So we're extremely grateful for your leadership, Mary, and I'm honored to have this ability to thank you publicly for all you've done for animals in the District of Columbia, and also for the many, many people who care about those animals. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Anne. And to be recognized by City Wildlife is a distinct honor for me. Some acknowledgements, like this one, carry special meaning for me because, you know, it speaks to something that I've been very blessed to be able to work on the council. I've worked on lots of pieces of legislation. I want to go forward with other pieces of legislation. And in that regard, I'm going to make an announcement through you because I hope you'll be a part of it. I would like, after the first of the year, to get together some sort of a working group. And that working group will help me sort through next steps in terms of wildlife protection.
Wonderful.
We are developing in the district all the time. There may be a slowdown now, you know, with the pandemic, but we're developing. We're developing along the Anacostia. We're developing here and developing there. We have to make it part of our development, part of our building codes. In fact, how will this affect wildlife? And unless it's built in, it'll just be forsaken because people don't naturally think of this. Oh, I want to put up a building over here. I want to do this over there. Well, what are the consequences to the animals? Because as you know, as well as anybody, that much of the harm to animals, wildlife, is not so much, you know, some random person going out with a gun and shooting them. It's because we destroy their habitat and they can't manage, they can't live. So that's the next thing I want to work on. And I'm saying it now here to you because I'm going to enlist you and City Wildlife to help out with that.
We would be very pleased and have a ton of ideas.
Wonderful.
It is my distinct honor to have the privilege to recognize Chris Weiss, Executive Director of the DC Environmental Network and a great friend of City Wildlife and wild animals. From the very beginning of our organization, when we were just barely an organization at all, Chris learned about our work and was enthusiastic about it, and he has never stopped being an advocate both for City Wildlife and for the animals that we serve. And beyond that, Chris has spent the last 20 years working in environmental groups here in Washington, D.C., most notably as the Executive Director of DC Environmental Network, which I think is fair to say is the cornerstone of the environmental movement in the city. And his excellent organizational skills and his strategic thinking has paid off in making Washington a national sustainability leader and a much safer place for all of its residents, by which I mean, as I normally do, both animals and humans. So Chris, long overdue, but thank you so much for all of your work. Here's to many, many more years of your success in leadership and advocacy for animals and the environment. To you, Chris.
Cheers. Thanks, Jim. I'm very, very happy to be here today. The DC Environmental Network has always felt that in order to have a healthy and sustainable city for people, we need policies and programs that look out for the health of our urban wildlife. That's why in September of 2011, some time ago, DCN was so pleased to hear for the first time from Ann Lewis of City Wildlife at a DC Environmental Network briefing and learn about the creation of city wildlife and better ways for humans to interact with urban wildlife. Personally, for me, the creation of city wildlife was a major event in that too many times when I would come across an injured animal, my options for rehabilitating a squirrel, a bird, or other creatures was extremely limited. Now city wildlife would be there to help all of us navigate these stressful moments. DC would also benefit with some of the best wildlife experts in the region who could engage with the network on developing many different policies that support a healthy interaction between wildlife and humans. City Wildlife has done a great job of starting and nurturing that conversation. DC has been proud to collaborate with City Wildlife the last decade and work with decision makers and stakeholders each year to make sure they have the resources to continue to represent the interests of wildlife. DC and City Wildlife have also partnered to make sure our rivers and creeks are cleaner, our trees are protected, and that wildlife are considered as we work to develop adaptation policies to deal with the climate crisis. That our partnership on projects like this make the importance of wildlife real and connected to the daily lives of all of us.
Thanks for the kind words, all the excellent work, and here's to you.
It is my honor to introduce Bill Yeaman, one of City Wildlife's local heroes. Bill, a naturalist in the Washington, D.C. area, was one of the first volunteers for City Wildlife's Lights Out DC program, now 10 years old. Since we opened our doors in 2013, Bill has helped to identify locations for the successful release of hundreds of birds, countless opossums, and several eastern cottontails, and the occasional slithery snake in and around Rock Creek Park. Although we've had many adventures in the park, one of the best was in 2017 when we renested and reunited 3 barred owlets that were grounded after a rainstorm. The tree that they were nesting in came crashing to the ground on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Bill visited the relocated family in his free time for days and assured us that the parents had indeed continued to feed and care for their young. So, Bill, tonight we're raising a glass to you, dear friend of City Wildlife.
Well, Paula, thank you so much. I really appreciate the honor from City Wildlife. It's an organization that I'm so glad to be a part of in helping in any way I can, certainly with Lights Out and helping to relocate the injured and orphaned wildlife that is ready for release back to the wild. The owlets, to me, was the highlight of all the many that I've been involved with release of, and that tree fell on a Saturday during the day. Fortunately, someone there knew of City Wildlife. They called, and they were able to take the owlets to City Wildlife Saturday, kept them over Sunday, and brought them back thanks to Paula's efforts to contact Suzanne Shoemaker out at Owl Moon Raptor Center to get a box, an owl box, that we were able to, with the help of staff at Rock Creek, to get these owl box up in the top of a tree right next to where the dead tree fell. And the owlets were fine. City Wildlife made sure they were okay to be put back in the wild. And sure enough, we put those owlets back up in the box once it was attached. And the parents were watching us, both those barred owls, as we were putting the box back up in the tree. The owls were saved, and without City Wildlife, they probably would have perished. So that's just one example of thousands and thousands of examples of the value of City Wildlife. And I really appreciate the honor more than I can say. So again, thank you. And I would like to toast City Wildlife and everybody on the staff and all the volunteers. We're making a difference, a huge difference.
Right. And cheers to all 3 of our wildlife heroes. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paula. Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations and thank you to those City wildlife heroes. It's time for our last quiz question. And it is, the largest order of mammals is rodents, which make up almost half of all mammal species. What's the second largest order of mammals, with hundreds of species, including several that live in Washington, D.C. Is that second largest order of mammals bats, carnivores, opossums, or lagomorphs? And lagomorphs, as you know, are hares and rabbits. So the second largest order of mammals after rodents, are they bats, carnivores, opossums, or lagomorphs? While you put your mind to that, I will put my pincers to another rubber duck, the last rubber duck of the evening.
Wow, tonight's grand prize winner for the birdwatching basket is number 45. Let's see who this lucky person is. The winner of the grand prize basket is Matt Sutko. Congratulations, Matt. You have won a treasure trove of prizes here. Nikon Monarch binoculars, the Sibley Guide to Birds, Peterson Field Guides Birding by Ear CD set for Eastern and Central North America, a beautiful navy blue t-shirt honoring the 2020 World Migratory Bird Day, a magnificent stuffed toy bald eagle from Wild Republic, and the City Wildlife Journal, and beautiful City Wildlife chocolates that are adorned with the drawings of Ann Lewis, City Wildlife's board president.
Paula, thank you for that. And our final quiz answer. What is the second largest order of mammals with hundreds of species, including several that live in the Washington area? It is bats. Bats come in number 2 after rodents in the mammals order. Now, I'd like now to remind you that to stick around, because at the end, you will be able to go into one of 4 different chat rooms that you should have received information on, or just stick around because the info will come up on your screen. Now, I would like Anne to finish off the evening. Anne?
Thank you, everybody, for attending our first annual Wildside virtual event. As in previous years, we like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, our donors, for your generous support and your compassion for animals. We depend on you to keep going to help animals, not only for your financial support, but also for your eyes and ears in the community, because very often you're the ones who are finding these animals and bringing them to us. So your contributions, both in kind and financial, are what enable us to keep going for these animals. I'm happy to say that during the year, we've been able to stay open every single day of the year, helping animals, even when most of the businesses were closed. And our numbers show it. We've taken in about the same number of animals this year and released the same number as in past years. But our bank account has taken something of a hit, because we haven't had walk-in visitors who often make donations into our donation box, and we've had more staff hours because of the lack of volunteers. So we need your help this year more than ever, and we greatly appreciate your coming to this event. Pandemic or no, these animals are going to continue needing us every single day of the year, and with your help, we'll be able to be there for them always. So thank you so much from all of us and from the animals we serve. Thank you and good night.